Welcome, everyone. Shall we dive in, Wayne, and start chatting about our CBE topic? It looks like everybody is getting into the session. Welcome, everyone. And while you're coming in, if you'd like to type into the chat where you're from and any expectations for today before Dr. Herman starts welcoming us and getting everything started.
Yeah, let's do our introductions. My name is Wayne Herman. I'm the Vice President and Chief Academic Officer here at Los Angeles Pacific University. I've been here with the university for about 7 years, and I'm excited to be able to be a part of the presentation on competency-based education today. George?
Yeah, and I'm George Hanshaw, Director of E-Learning Operations here at Los Angeles Pacific University, and excited to be here as well because we went through an amazing learning session as we worked through all the CBE related things that we worked through from the WASC application on through actually designing the courses. So it's been a fantastic journey and we're looking forward to sharing it with you.
Just a couple of preliminaries before we jump into the topic. That is that this webinar is being recorded and it's also being live streamed, just so you're aware of that. And then this is part of a series of webinars that we at Los Angeles Pacific University have been doing for more than a year now, looking at human-centered design and learning, and really trying to focus on different aspects of that as we as an institution grapple with what it means to provide the best possible learning experience for our students. And our most recent development in that area has been to develop a competency-based education program. So, George, I think you've got a question for everybody.
Yeah, Wayne, and I just found out that our chat is disabled right now.
Uh-oh.
So maybe if, while we're fixing that, if we could just type our responses into the Q&A, we'll be able to see them there and we'll call them out to kind of be a little bit flexible here. So the question is, what have you heard about CBE in the higher education circles? What have you been hearing about it? Has it been positive, negative, general? What have you been hearing about CBE in the higher education space? CBE is the next big thing. Thanks, Craig. Appreciate that. We're working on the sound. I guess Richard just says there's multiple voices being heard from each speaker, kind of like an echo. And if you could just, well, maybe if chat is still disabled, Wayne, maybe we just have to rethink on the fly how we operate. Yazan said, I did not hear about CBE.
We'll have to work through the Q&A.
Yeah, so we'll work through the Q&A. I did not hear about CBE. Would you please give more explanations? Absolutely. That's going to be a big thing that we're doing here today is explaining and going through the process that we went through as well. So I appreciate everybody's input on this and how we're looking through it. And this kind of leads us to another question. So some of us haven't really heard of CBE much. Some of us have heard of it quite a bit. So we're going to just continue to use the Q&A forum as well. If you could post your responses there. And the question is, why are institutions such as WGU, which is primarily offering CBE programs, what do you hear about those universities such as WGU that offers primarily CBE? So we're trying to get a basis of where we're going to go from here. Because WGU, I think they might even be all CBE. I'm not sure about that, but I know they have quite a bit. So have you heard things about other institutions such as WGU? Oh, Gary says very general comments, but concerns about students staying on track and completing their programs. That's one of the big things that WAS asks us to use technology for to help, or put something in place, and we chose to use a high level of technology that we'll go through that as well. Any other, has anybody else been hearing anything? No, but I heard about QM. Yes, quality matters. Is that the QM we're talking about? That is hugely important. So throughout the webinar, since we're having issues with chat, just post any questions right in the Q&A, and both Wayne and I will have it up so we can see it as we're going through this. So yeah, Wayne, why CBE?
Yeah, I think that's the first question, George. What are the key factors that led us as Los Angeles Pacific University to develop a CBE program? And maybe before you take a pass at that, let me just give a little bit of context. We actually attempted to launch a CBE program initially about 7 years ago. And in that attempt, we were not successful. And part of the reason, in hindsight, looking back at that, is we took what was an existing a program designed as a credit-based program rather than a competency-based education program. And we tried to fit it into a CBE framework, if you will. And in fact, that process did not serve us well. In the end, the feedback we got when it went through a review process with our accreditor was that it wasn't a good match. We didn't clearly articulate what we needed to for an actual competency-based education program. So, so George, maybe walk us through that process. What were in this more recent effort on our part to develop a CBE program? What were some of the key factors that led us down that path?
Yeah. Oh, thanks, Wayne. Excellent question. And the key factors, really, the first thing was we wanted to be able to reach a larger audience, because we know we've all heard everyone talking in the articles about the different expectations of people entering into universities now. And we have our audience primarily is non-traditional. So it means they have a lot of experience. So we kind of wanted to meet a certain section of that population that we're not meeting now with the CBE program, where they can bring in that experience with that through very specific programs, such as the Master of Science in Instructional Design and Technology that we just got approval for through through WASC. And we wanted to really, when we reach a larger population of people, and so we wanted to reach them, but we also wanted to expand the level of inclusion that we practice here at LAPU. And by implementing a CBE program, we're able to do that. One of the ways that we've done that practically within the curriculum is by there's a lot of points. So Dr. Trey Glazatoff is our full-time faculty person, and she has ensured that there's multiple points where the students get to discuss what they are going to be able to provide to show mastery. So we give them an actual voice into what they're doing. And that was a big deal as far as inclusion, because everyone comes from a different background with different experiences, and we wanted to embrace that. So that's another one of the reasons why we chose to go for a competency-based education program. So they can speak into, we have the parameters set for the competency, and then they can speak into it as far as what they're going to do to show that, which is kind of neat. It's shaping up very well. I can't wait till we actually practice that. And
say, George,
yeah.
Before you go on, I know you've got a couple more points to make there, but I just realized that with some of our participants here not being that familiar with CBE, I think it might be good for us just to give a high-level overview of what makes CBE different. And so, just at a very high level, a competency-based education program, or CBE program, is fundamentally different from a credit-based program, which most of us are familiar with, where students earn a certain number of credits. It's based on seat time, if you will, in a classroom, whether that's in a physical classroom or an online classroom. And it's based on a series of assessments that add up to a grade. And so, for example, here at LAPU, we offer most of our existing programs are all developed as credit-based programs. They take place in an online forum because we are an online institution. And we offer 8-week sessions. They're intensive semester courses. They're worth 3 credits each, typically. Lab classes worth 4. So that's the nature of traditional, if I can call it that, traditional higher education programs. CBE takes a different approach and says, what matters is that the student is able to demonstrate competency in certain areas of knowledge and skills. And however long it takes them to achieve that competency or to demonstrate that competency is how long the course is, so to speak. So typically, right, CBE models function not on a semester or even a term, a typical term, but they function on a subscription model where you enroll for a certain period of time, and then you are able to learn as much as you can during that time. And you learn as much as you can often based on the experience that you have had that you bring into the learning environment and are able to demonstrate what you know and what you're able to do. And once you've demonstrated, once you've passed that summative assessment, you can then move on to the next competency. And so at a very high level, that's CBE. I'm sure you can expand on that, George, but I just thought for those who are not at all familiar with CBE, it'd be worthwhile giving that kind of brief overview.
Thanks, Wayne. And there's a couple good questions in the Q&A that are, I think, natural expansion points for that. So if I may, Gary talked about a major challenge seems to be how to measure competence. We need a fair and efficient way. Absolutely. It is a challenge. And the way we approach that challenge was we went through an actual validation process for each, and this was commended by the WASP review team, which was kind of neat because it's a difficult process to go through. It's a time-consuming process to go through where we actually validate the project parameters, the competencies, the competency skills. So in the high view of it, we have our competency, which we decided upon, and the competency could be, one of them was e-learning development. It would get a little bit deeper, but e-learning development. And then we would have competency skills that were decided upon by up to 6 instructional designers in this case, because that's what the degree is for. So 6 subject matter experts. And then we actually went through a rating process to rate them and came up with a cut score. So we know exactly which competency skills need to be assessed. So it doesn't mean that all competency skills, the ones that didn't make it, weren't important. Just means they weren't important to be assessed underneath that certain competency. And then that actually became our rubric. So we use a lot of statistics, which was fun to come up with the competency skill that showed or demonstrated that competency. So the mastery, and then that became the rubric as well, which for us, for the fair way, we bend a little bit more towards the fair rather than efficient, because we're going to have 2 raters rate the project. So we're not having any multiple choice tests or anything. They're completing a project. Rater 1 will be their faculty coach, because each person has conversations with a specific faculty coach, and they will rate, and it'll be amongst 5 different categories. So the category they have to meet has been defined in the rubric. And then a second person will go in and rate as well. If they disagree about whether that person has met the standards, a third rater is brought in to break the tie. So that's kind of how, as a high level, how we approach that process as well. We can get you more details if you like from what we did. I just don't want to bore everyone by nerding out on the assessment piece.
Perhaps as part of the broader context, we should just mention as well that the program that we have received approval to offer as our first CBE program is a Master of Science in Instructional Design and Technology. And that's obviously, with George being our Director of E-Learning Operations, that's very much in his wheelhouse, because that's what he spends his time doing, is designing our courses and running and leading the team that does all the course design for us. So he's not only the leader of that team, but he's also a subject matter expert and a CBE expert for us in developing this particular program.
And that's kind of a good point, because we did have that issue 7 years back where we were denied. So we thought, okay, let's stack the deck, if you will, in our favor, because we have instructional designers, multimedia professionals, so instructional media designers and technology specialists on my team. So for this first one, we wanted to make sure that we had more than ample enough people speaking into it, especially through the application process, to make sure we were successful. So it took a lot of people speaking into that application process and the design process. So big shout out to everybody who took part in that. It was a cross-functional team, which was amazing.
There have been a number of really good questions that have come through here. Maybe just for us to address a few of them. I mentioned earlier in my comments that there's a summative assessment. The other type of assessment, of course, is formative assessment, which is used to simply give a student feedback. And in our course-based design, our credit-based courses, rather, most assignments that students complete are have both formative and summative elements to them. So students get feedback, but they also get points. And if you divide those two and say there's formative assessment that is not summative, then those formative assessments are just for feedback, just to say how a student is doing. And in the CBE approach, typically those two are divided more than they are in a traditional credit-based approach, because in the early going of working through a competency, the student gets feedback about whether they have the knowledge, whether they're demonstrating the right kind of skills. But the real key is they have to, by the end, they have to demonstrate, and that's where the summative assessment comes in. They have to demonstrate their ability to master those skills and that knowledge through some kind of an artifact, whether that's a presentation, whether it's something they create, again, because of our particular program being in instructional design, they may have to create a course shell as a part of one of their assignments, and they demonstrate their competency in meeting certain specific items that are called out in the rubric that George was mentioning earlier. So you could perhaps give us an example of a couple of things they would need to do in creating a course, or a couple of the competencies they would need to meet for that.
Yeah, would you like to see if I could show something? Show one of our docs that we did?
Sure.
Would that be okay? So I'll do that in a moment. While I'm talking, I'm going to try to find that real quick. And Dina had a question: does CBE work best for hard skill learning rather than soft skill learning? That's a great question. And I'm going to ask Wayne his thoughts too, but I personally think it's great for both, because it's a skill is a skill and you have to practice. Leadership is a skill that we have to practice. We have to learn. We have to always grow. Same with the hard skill. So Wayne, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that it's great for students to be able to demonstrate soft skills. And that's a part of the learning process. And as we've been working on this particular program, we've identified certain soft skills that students need to develop in order to be leaders within the field of instructional design. So yeah, I would say it's definitely both. I think the other question, there was a question, someone asked, is CBE like testing out of a class? In some ways, although the CBE program has to be designed for students who come to the program with a range of experience. And maybe just to go back to one of the questions that George was answering earlier about why we chose to offer the CBE program, part of that is because CBE, better than other types of programs, allows students to leverage their experience. So if someone has been working, for example, in the instructional design field but doesn't have a master's degree in it, they may be able to come in and demonstrate competency very quickly in certain of the courses or competencies that are required for this particular CBE program. But they may have to learn others that they don't have the experience in. And so the way the program is designed, there are learning activities for students who come in with no knowledge or experience within the field, and it helps them develop the knowledge and skills that they need in order to get to the summative assessment and pass it, effectively. But for those who already have experience, it allows them to proceed through that process much quicker. One simple example from a different field, if we were offering, for example, an MBA, and developing a strategic plan was part of that. There are some business leaders who've been developing strategic plans for years, but don't have a degree. So if they come in, they see that and say, well, yeah, I can develop a strategic plan. Let me show you. Whereas someone who's new to business, perhaps hasn't been working in business, but wants to pursue an MBA, doesn't know where to start with a strategic plan, that person would need to go through all the steps of learning that are part of the CBE course in order to be able to get to the point where they could then produce a strategic plan that met the assignment rubrics.
Right. And one thing that's kind of neat about that is it's a very active way that we can embrace as a higher education community, embrace other people's experiences in life and work. And one thing about that person, so if they know how to do this, to create a strategic plan, they're still going to come in the beginning of that class and have a strong conversation with a faculty member, a faculty coach who's a professional in whatever area it is. In this case, it would be in business. So they'll still get some coaching time as well. So they're going to grow just from that also. So it's not just going like CLEP tests used to be the big thing. Go in, take a test, get a certain amount of credit for your undergraduate degrees. So they still have a valuable experience, even when they come in with a lot of experience. We get to stack on top of it, which is kind of neat as far as that goes. And then key learnings. Oh, Craig asked about some key learnings as we worked and implemented CBE program. I think this might be a good point to show the spreadsheet, Wayne.
Sure.
I wasn't initially going to do that, but I think it's a good opportunity here. So I'm going to share my screen if I may.
Just need to make sure it's large enough for people to see.
Yeah, including myself. Okay, is this large enough for everyone to see?
See if you can go up to 125 or so.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I know how to use Google Sheets, because that could have been embarrassing if I didn't know. All right. So the first thing we asked about domains and competencies. So one of the questions was, how do we validate the competence? How do we validate what we're doing? Well, we have domains. In this case, you see a technical foundation domain, and underneath that is a competency, instructional design competency, which is called creating learning experiences to support learner acquisition, application, and creation of knowledge. So this is so the competency is basically the class. It equates to a course where they come in and learn all of these skills underneath. They're going to be able to examine, assess, design human-centered instructional and non-instructional interventions, which is cool, and design learning assessments aligned to instructional interventions. So they're going to be able to conduct all three of those. And hopefully in our map here, if we see, here's our instructional design course, we have program learning outcomes. Here, digital learning asset development, learning evaluation. So these are program level objectives, and we see how they all map here. So developing, introducing, and kind of one of the neat things, I'm just going to come down to where we have one with our nice pink here, is we color coded everything so we match up once they've completed all of these mastery levels in the different courses. So you will see them in different courses underneath different competency skills. we're actually using a lot of technology to show these pie charts, donut charts getting filled so they can see, so students, learners can see their progress throughout the time. But to get back to the question, we have domains, competency, and then competency skill underneath. To judge that or to grade that, we then have what we call our learning story, where we generate tasks for those individual competency skills. Then we rate those competency skills, and then we run our analysis where we have our reliability statistics. And if any of the raters fall outside of 2 standard deviations or well underneath the correlation coefficient of 0.7, those are removed. And then that's how we come up with, so we have our project artifact description. So that's how we come up with our required tasks for assessment. Once we have that, this feeds directly into the rubric. And the rubric is, we judge on, did they reach novice practitioner for those specific pieces, advanced beginner, experienced practitioner, advanced practitioner. So then the raters will rate on those specific processes. Now that's a lot of detail, so we can go into more detail offline if anyone has any questions, but I just wanted to show you the thought process, the line actually that went into how we go about grading these. So then these pieces here become the rubric, and they are rated by how they meet any of these advanced, experienced, or all the way through expert, which is 5. So that is how we chose to go about it. Certainly not the only way to go about those things. Did you have a thought on that, Wayne?
No, I think it's helpful to see that. And again, I appreciate your offer to connect with people offline if they want to get into more detail. I think, part of the learnings of this, just to respond to Craig's question, part of the learnings have been in discovering and responding to a number of challenges, if you will, that we've faced with launching this program. And one of those is that the CBE program, in our case, we're accredited under the WASC Senior College and University Commission, here being a California institution. One of the challenges is that CBE is seen as a structural change for our accreditor because we're offering a different type of program from what we're already offering. So we're offering currently associate, bachelor's, and master's degrees at LAPU. But whenever an institution in WASC wants to offer a CBE program, they always have to go through a structural change process to get approval for offering the first CBE program because it is so different from the typical credit-based program. And so, as I mentioned, 7 years ago, we tried it. We were not successful. We decided, after reviewing the matter further, we decided that was not the time for us to do it. And so we abandoned, if you will, that effort at the time. Fast forward six years or so, we realized that we were now in a different place, and we had expertise in place that we didn't have 7 years ago. The landscape had changed. CBE had become much more common, and we were able to look at other models and find ways that we could be successful compared to the 7 years ago. So one of the challenges, though, is just going through that accreditation process and getting approval for a CBE program. We were grateful to have put together a successful proposal and got through the sub-change process in a short amount of time. So, that part of it, thanks to George and Trelisa, who is our subject matter expert, our full-time faculty working on the program, and others, that helped us get through that process. A second learning has been that in order to offer an effective CBE program, we needed an LMS with a robust data model to be able to track progress more efficiently and effectively than we could do with our existing LMS. And so we ended up working with a company called D2L and their LMS called Brightspace, which has that kind of robust data model that allows us to now monitor progress much more in a much more timely manner and give the feedback to students that they need. The model is, one of the other differences of the CBE model is it tends to be individual student and faculty coach type of relationship as opposed to a classroom. And so the coach is working directly with a number of students who are working on one or more competencies. And it's very much a mentoring type of approach to teaching rather than simply providing them with the learning materials, presenting lectures, things of that nature that you might do in a more traditional credit-based course. So having the right LMS is really key to that. I think we've also learned that the challenge of integrating a subscription-based model into our existing systems has been a bigger challenge than we initially appreciated. We're still working through that. We're still having to figure out how we modify existing systems so that they can handle a different kind of term. We're working with the idea of a 4-month term that begins at the start of each month. And just getting our various systems from our student records system to our financial aid system to student accounts to all to our lead flow, our lead generation system, all of those systems to work nicely together with a different term model has been one of the challenges. And then working through the ability to award financial aid, because the Department of Education sees a CBE program differently, and they have different requirements, different expectations. How do you monitor satisfactory academic progress? It's different under this kind of a program, and all of that. Learning to do all those things, working under the normal resource and workload constraints that we have as a fairly lean, small organization. Those are the challenges, but we're working through that. We're using an agile model to try to move things forward at a rapid pace. And I appreciate George and the rest of the team that are leading that initiative and helping us work through all of those challenges as we work toward implementing this program in 2023.
Yeah, and if I may, the agile process is hugely beneficial if you can make that mental switch to that, because there's so many parts and pieces that have to come together. It takes that process where you're willing to experiment, see what works, and then iterate, especially in the course design area. One way, if I could share my screen for 30 seconds again, Wayne, I wanted to show, because you spoke about technology and D2L, hugely important to super embrace technology. And we're doing that with our Brightspace D2L partner. And remember when I talked about, and I'm going to refresh my screen so you can see the donuts. So these, and this is just a test, it's not wholly complete yet, but you see how the donuts came up? If they were completed, each learner will see an individual screen of these on their own when they log in. So for learning analytics and evaluation, remember that competency area, that professional learning or program learning outcome, they have 6 things to complete. As they complete those in the courses, these are fed from the rubric. So if 2 instructors say they've passed to this level, then they're going to get a part of this complete. And this will be linked to a course map as well of what they need to complete for all of this. So that's one way, because you see there is 5, 11, 22, 20, or 30, 38 total pieces that have to be completed for the student to be successful, for the learner to be successful. So the technology keeps it current all the time. And we can easily get reports and things like this through this. And the system also uses what we call intelligence agents. So we can set it up to send out emails, content, different triggers for whatever the student needs. And we're in the process of setting that up. So technology is a big deal when looking at something like this, because you have to track all of that. And you have to make it simple for the student. Simple never means easy, but as simple as you can make it is what we have to do.
Yeah, yeah. Great point, George. Why don't you talk through a little bit about one of the differences we have with our LAPU learning model and how that has contributed to developing the CBE program, as well as the different faculty engagement model. I saw there was a question as to whether it would take more time for a professor teaching in a CBE course as opposed to a credit-based course.
Right. Well, those are both great questions. So can we start with the LAPU model?
Yeah.
If Callista's out there, big shout out to Callista. We presented this at a conference last year where we talked about the learn, apply, practice, utilize model of learning. So the LAPU learning model. I'll go ahead and share that as well. And I'll be posting this before we leave if anyone would like to see it. So here is the learn, apply, practice, utilize model, where the learn piece, that's where they get all the content and they get it through an active learning. So for CBE, that includes conversations with the coach, and it includes all the active learning content within the LMS as well. And then they're going to apply it. So they're shown and given guidance on how to apply the content. Then they begin practicing, and then they begin kind of putting it together and combining this new knowledge with their previous knowledge. And then in the practice phase, that's where they're going to narrow their focus based on their experiences, skills, and curiosity. And it's important to include curiosity in there because that's why we learn. We're curious, right? And they're going to approach the instructional design, problem solving, and decision making in that way. And then utilize is really for our process in CBE. That's where they're going to be creating and turning in their final artifact to get feedback. So they're going to create and share an artifact that demonstrates their progression towards mastery. So that is actually, so the utilize piece, we may have somebody go directly to the utilize piece, such as the example that you gave with the leader who has experience doing creating a strategic plan already. They may not go through all of the learn, apply, and practice pieces. They may go directly to utilize, but they'll still have conversations with their coach. So everything will be packaged and formulated so they can begin adding to that knowledge base as well. So it's not just a test and you're done kind of thing. We don't want to give that impression about CBE either, because I mean, we all love a good conversation with our professor, right? Because lots of good nuggets of content can come from that. And that's why the professors have to be relevant and experienced in that key field. So that is the LAPU learning model. Any thoughts on that, Wayne? Because you were a big proponent of us being able to use it. And WASC made a statement of how they liked that model and how they thought that it was an exemplary approach to the process as well.
Yeah, I think we use it not only in CBE programs, but also in our credit-based programs. But I think it is particularly well suited to a CBE approach because of that emphasis at the end on utilizing. It allows us to really focus the students, on the ability to demonstrate competency, which is what CBE is all about. So, I think on the faculty engagement question that had come up, we've kind of tossed this around a little bit, and obviously we'll have more we'll have more data once we have actually launched the program and are working with students in the program. But in terms of our design, we see the interaction different, but not necessarily more than what we have with our credit-based courses. And the reason I say that is even in credit-based courses, there are expectations, even at the federal government level, as to faculty having regular and substantive engagement with students. And so whether they're teaching in an online course, it still means that they, on a weekly basis in our courses, on a weekly basis, they're engaging in discussions. They're interacting with students in that way. They're grading papers, giving meaningful feedback to students, as part of that process. They're answering student questions that may come to them via email or phone or text or whatever methods the students choose to use. So they are engaging with the students. They're just doing it in a class rather than one-on-one, working on, with one individual student, typically. Whereas in the CBE model, they're typically working with the one student. So at the beginning of each, when a new student enrolls, part of our model is that a faculty member will meet with that student initially to identify what skills and knowledge they may already have that are relevant to the program that they're enrolling in, and help them then set out a plan as to which order they're going to work through the different competencies. There is a final competency that's kind of like a capstone competency, so that one will obviously come at the end, but there's no particular order required for the others. And so students who have experience in one area but not another, might choose different pathways to get to the end. And so that initial conversation is for the faculty member to have that initial conversation with students and then be able to help guide them through which pathway makes the most sense for them as a student. Beyond that, when a student enrolls now in one of the competencies, the faculty mentor, faculty coach will have a similar conversation about that specific competency to say, okay, well, what do you know about this already? What have you done in this area? And help them plan out how they're going to approach demonstrating mastery of that particular competency. And then beyond that, it's really, as we've said, a coaching type relationship where the faculty member says, well, here, work through these materials that are there for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Checking in with them to say, hey, how's it going? Have you gotten stuck? Are you making progress? And they'll be able to see some of the student progress through the activities that they've completed that'll show up in the system. So they'll be monitoring that on a regular basis, but they'll also be engaging in conversations with them a bit more than what we would typically expect in a credit-based course. So different kind of work. I don't see it as taking a tremendous more amount of time, but being different from what the typical experience is in a credit-based course.
And kind of, if I can add to that,
certainly.
During the course design process, we actually have a template where, okay, these are the mandatory coach interactions with times as well. So you want to design that into the course so the expectations are clear for whoever the faculty coach is. And also, we talked about embracing and using technology to a high level. Well, the part of the reason why we chose Brightspace was I talked about the intelligence agents. Well, we can send messages and emails that are personalized to the learner, and that can include, captioned video, things like that directly from the professor, and those will go out automatically once they are created and set up whenever a student is reaching whatever the criteria that we've stated for those intelligence agents. So it's another way to kind of really expand the reach without overburdening the faculty coach and giving the student a better experience for the learning. So it's kind of neat to be able to do that with technology as well as that personal touch. So creating a personal touch with technology is what those intelligence agents help us do. Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, George, that we've used an agile approach to this, and part of that is that we've taken an agile approach to designing the program, and we've worked with a small cross-functional team. We've tried to leverage, looking for those challenges or obstacles and how do we overcome them and move beyond them, rather than a waterfall approach, which is you have a big long schedule of everything that has to happen between now and the day that you go live. And so, that's been part of the process. But I think it'd be helpful for our participants here if you could just describe briefly how that agile process has related to actual course development and how you've been able to use an agile approach to developing courses, because I think people would appreciate that.
Okay, that is a great put. So I'll focus on our course design, the agile process we use there. And it's important. You know what? If you're getting tired of me sharing my screen, I'm sorry. This will be the last one for everyone. So I believe this is the one. I opened the right doc even. So I'm going to scroll up here. So you know me, I love my acronyms, LAPU, learn, apply, practice, utilize. So when we switch to the agile method for course design, one of the big things that we learn about agile is don't try to just take somebody else's model and plug it in, because it won't work. It has to be unique to you, because we all have different needs and wants for the agile process. So we turn into laps. And this happens to actually be the laps that we use for the instructional design competency learning story. So the first thing we did was get together a cross-functional team, and the team has the conversation, and the team has all the decision makers there. So when decisions need to be made for that course, the decision makers are there. That's a big deal, because there's no time wasted for waiting for responses. So the team has to be somewhat autonomous. Now, they may run across things that they have to get guidance for, and that's perfectly okay, but they have the autonomy to make any course level decisions there. They may want to include more people, but they can't. Like in lap one, they created the final artifact. That was the goal. Lap one, create the final artifact. We did the task analysis. I showed you the lead SME reviews and finalizes the language. And then there's a draft, and then everybody's speaking into this at all times. So it's a true collaborative approach as opposed to divide and conquer. It's a lot of collaboration, and it actually makes the process go a little bit quicker, because here is the final artifact that they're going to have to do. So in this case, for the instructional design competency, in a nutshell, they're going to create a learning blueprint, which incorporates learning theory, student-centered learning strategies, and assessment design for their project. And all that was done through conversations that happened in these forums, in the statistics, and then live conversations as well in this initial lab. So that's kind of how we at LAPU moved forward with it. And what I really love about this approach is lap one, Daryl was leading the way in lap one. He is the lead SME, and he led the way. Now, lap two in module development, the leader can change. Like when we go into IM development in lap three, is Daryl going to be the best person for the IM, or should somebody else on the team kind of take that lead? So it's very collaborative, and leadership shifts as needs shift within the lab, and the team also decides the specificities of what needs to happen within the lab. So that is how we applied Agile within the learning design, the course design process. Hopefully that wasn't too specific, but I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that leadership can change amongst the labs, and that's a wonderful thing. It's a true collaborative process rather than divide and conquer. Because when we work in teams, sometimes we can do the divide and conquer, but we chose to go as a collaborative way. So that's why it was important for us not to just take somebody else's Agile method and plug it into ours. We had to learn about Agile and then come up with our method, which was a collaborative approach as well. I would love to say that I was the brain behind it, but all I did was start the conversation, and it just took a life of its own. It was absolutely amazing to watch that happen.
Just 2 points of clarification for those perhaps not familiar with some of our acronyms. The IM stands for instructional media.
Thanks, Wayne.
So the initial part is designing, the course and the content, but then when it comes to designing instructional media for that course, it could be a different person who takes the lead on that. And that makes sense because we have specialists in instructional media who may not be the subject matter experts for the course, but they're really good at what they do in designing instructional media. The other comment is simply that in traditional agile terminology, they speak of sprints. So you have a 2-week to 4-week, maybe 6-week sprint, depending on the nature of the organization and how they develop that. And so that's what we're calling laps, because lap is the first part of LAPU, and it makes sense for us to be using laps rather than sprints. But if you're familiar with agile terminology and the agile model, essentially what we're talking about is the same idea conveyed in the terminology of sprints, where a team focuses on accomplishing a specific objective over a short period of time and works all out to get that done, and then moves on to the next sprint and so on as you progress forward through an agile development process. So I think we're nearing the end of our time here. Any final thoughts, George?
Oh, really? Wow, this time went fast. Thanks, everybody. No, just my thoughts for CBE is really, after hearing all of this, does CBE kind of make sense for your institution? Just at a knee-jerk level, after hearing all of this, is it something that fits? Because not everything fits every institution. So does it make sense for your institution? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? And while people are putting that in, Yazdan said, would you please mention CBE was more successful in graduate or undergraduate level? We purposely went after the graduate level, so we don't have really a lot of experience with undergraduate, but I do know, because I do kind of follow a lot of the documentation on this, even high schools, there are specific high schools in the United States that use a CBE approach, a competency-based education approach. So it is growing, and if those high schools start to get traction and take off, I will say it will be a big deal for undergrad. Do I know? Absolutely not. But I like to talk about it and hypothesize.
Well, certainly Western Governors University has a lot of undergrad CBE programs, and so it does work for both. We felt for our purposes we would start with the graduate level program and as our first, and then we'll see where we go from there in terms of other programs we may develop. I just thought I'd mention one possible resource for people, and that is the CBE network. It also goes by the acronym CBE network. You can find it if you Google it, but that's a network of people and institutions that are involved in offering CBE programs, even down, as George was saying, to the high school level. So that's something you may want to check out and look at the resources that CBEN makes available to participants and to the general public.
Yeah, and I just put a copy of the LAPU learning model in the chat. I know it was disabled, but I'm hoping that you can see in there. If not, we'll send it via email after this then, if you would like to have it. And if anyone has any questions, I'm open for people contacting me at ghanshaw@lapu.edu.
Yeah, likewise, you're welcome to reach out to me, W. Herman, Herman, @lapu.edu. So thank you all for joining us today. It's been great to be able to share with you and to hear your great questions, and hopefully we've given you something further to think about. And if you want to explore this further and want to collaborate with us on it, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to share further.
Well, thank you, Wayne. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate everybody taking their time. Have a great day.
Okay, bye.